International Women's Day, as I said, we thought it would be a really good opportunity to use this this time to delve a bit deeper into some of the work that Open Arms does that maybe we don't share so much with supporters. And with current events, what's happening in the world, I think the role of women and girls is kind of hot topic at the moment. So I think there's a lot that Open Arms and the work that Open Arms can add to this discussion. For our supporters who might be watching this, I'm Claire and I head up the UK team whose work is really to amplify the work in Malawi and to raise funds to support all the projects in Malawi and all the work that we do to support children and families in Malawi. And I'm delighted to be joined by Jane Malawi from the UK as well, or who is in the UK as well, and Christy Banda, who's in Malawi. And we're really just going to have a chat around the role of women and girls in Malawi, the insights that you both have, and any experiences that you've got. We know that women play a really important role in the work that we do in Malawi, and Open Arms take a really holistic approach to supporting guardians to bring up the children within their families and support the families to survive and thrive as a unit together, and empower them into self-sufficiency and a safer and healthier future as well. So I've got a few questions to kind of guide us through a conversation today, but maybe if we start with introductions. Jane, do you want to go first?
Okay, thank you, Claire. So yes, my name is Jane Malawi. I'm a medical doctor from Malawi. I'm currently working in the UK, but I've been a board member for Open Arms Infant Home from as far back as 2002, and hopefully still going strong in that role. Thank you.
Thank you. And Christy?
Thank you very much, Claire. My name is Christy Banda. I am also from Malawi. So I would like to introduce myself as a feminist as well as a gender equity specialist. And I'll be working with women in Malawi, vulnerable women in rural communities, to advance or promote women's rights, as well as do a lot of advocacy around issues of women empowerment. I am also a safeguarding officer for Open Arms Infant Home in Malawi. Thank you.
That's brilliant, thank you. So I suppose the first question really is, what do you see as the biggest barriers that still need to be addressed in achieving gender equality in Malawi? Jane, should we start with you?
I suppose we still have harmful traditional or tribal norms that still are not in favor of the women. And also these norms make it impossible for a woman to be a decision maker, and also to empower her to do the best for herself and her family. And yet the women in Malawi, but also in Africa, they're the main caregivers for children and the family. So I think if we can address those gender issues, we probably could get, a lot of things that are done well through the woman. So that's what I can say.
Thank you. And Christy, have you got anything to add?
Yeah, maybe just to add on what Jenna said, I think when you look at gender equality, or basically gender inequality in Malawi, it doesn't exist in a vacuum. It comes from systems of oppression. And I think one of the systems of oppression that we deal with in Malawi is patriarchy. And patriarchy manifests itself in the structure, culture, and maybe we can say also economical structures that we have in Malawi. So this is what actually forms our our policies, our legal frameworks, and it also manifests itself in our culture, how we see women, how the society see women. Basically, that creates hierarchies where women are seen as disposable objects, and this is manifested in issues like cultural practices that Jen has mentioned, harmful cultural practices. We have issues of child marriages. Until recently, I think the policy was that a 13-year-old girl can still get married in Malawi until like 2015, where the Marriage Divorce Act came into play, where it actually lays the marriage age to 16 and yeah, with parental consent and 18. But before then, we see churches, communities actually marrying off girls below the age of 13, and that's horrible. And that's one of the barriers that actually prevent women from attaining from attaining the status, from affirming their rights. So we also have a barrier that we call the way economic opportunities are distributed because of the same patriarchal norms that have manifested themselves in the community. We see women as people who do not deserve to have productive resources. Their role, their gender role is in the community, is in the home, taking care of children. But this is unpaid work, like Jen mentioned. So we also have, I think the most intense issue that is happening is gender-based violence, and it's widespread. We have physical violence, intimate partner violence. Until recently, I mean, issues like intimate, what we call marital rape wasn't considered as rape at all. So all these barriers are what prevent us from achieving gender equality in Malawi, just to mention a few. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, and we've definitely seen that in the work of Open Arms as well. I recognise a lot of what you've both said. And what about how things have evolved over the years? Do you think things are improving, and kind of how is the work of Open Arms helping, or how do we see that in the work of Open Arms? Christy, do you want to go first this time?
Okay, thank you. Yeah, I think there's some involvement in the way women have been treated, or in women rights issues in Malawi. To begin with, we have a lot of legal frameworks that are coming into play. I think some of them that I've mentioned that never existed, maybe in one-party system or even colonial system. But there are so many feminist movements that are coming in and fighting for this kind of policies to come in. And also we can mention the involvement of just coming in of women rights organizations and people just working towards women rights. I think that is something that didn't happen maybe in the 90s or before that in the 80s. So there's a lot of women rights organization advocating for women rights, affirming women rights. We've seen women going in the streets that never used to happen to fight against gender-based violence. We've seen women being arrested, but at the end of it all, we have seen advancements of these women rights. And also what we also seen is a lot of women actually attaining leadership positions as member of parliament, as councillors. A lot of young women actually are showing interest to come in and take these leadership positions, and which is very exciting because despite there's still barriers there's still harassment issues that happen, but women are still coming up and movements are still fighting. Women rights organizations are still fighting for these women to affirm their rights and to be able to hold the space and the platform for them to attain this platforms, these leadership positions. And when you see the work that Open Arms is doing, is actually shift some of those norms that women, working with vulnerable women that are usually overlooked, sidelined, marginalized. So bringing these women and say this will be our focus, I think that's incredible work that Open Arms is doing in Malawi, because when you look at orphans, vulnerable women, widows, they really they face multiple compounding marginalization, and Open Arms is saying no, this is what we'll focus on. We'll try to elevate these women for people to be able to see them as equals in the society. So that's what I will say for now. Thank you.
Brilliant, thank you. Jane, have you got anything to add to that?
Yes, thank you, Claire. So essentially, as Christy has said, there is now a change in Malawi towards gender equality in the workplace, as well as in education, including getting into universities. So the numbers for girls and boys are now probably being equal, getting into university. And in the workplace, gender parity is a big issue right now. And then there will be NGOs that are empowering women to run businesses. So where we are concerned directly for Open Arms is that our program is empowering women to maybe grow their own food. So providing the implementation things that they need, including providing seed, which can be difficult in our setting for someone to access proper seed, certified seed, and we're doing that. So that will empower the women that are going to look after our babies to be self-sufficient where food is concerned, but also empowering them to have something like animals, livestock, so chickens and goats. They can sell these goats for money and run their families, and also they can use the animals for feeding their families. And this is quite important because we need to empower the women that are going to look after those babies to make sure that they're self-sufficient in food. At the moment, the situation is tough in Malawi because we haven't really had good crop yields in the last 3 years. And this year is particularly probably the worst we've ever seen in a long time, in the sense that a bag of maize became impossible to buy for most people. I think it went as far as 100,000 kwacha per bag, yet the minimum wage for a big proportion of the population in Malawi is 90,000. So if we say they ought to pay rent, they ought to pay for water, and their firewood, then it's been impossible for most families to actually survive. When I went to Malawi for 2 weeks in the last earlier this month, and then people were actually buying maize bran for food. And that's almost like just having dust, sawdust, essentially, with no nutrition whatsoever. So I think our program, by empowering those women that are going to look after our babies, to give them food and to give them the capacity to grow their own food and maybe have livestock, is actually going to be what will succeed in this program, because we need to move away from institutionalizing children and then let them grow in their own environment, in their own local populations. Because if we institutionalize them, it's proving to be almost impossible to have them integrate and be accepted in their communities. So, as I said, the main caregivers in Malawi are women, but they do not have the financial muscle, they do not have the financial decision making for the families. If we empower them, if we target them to give them what they need to accept those babies that they are related to, whose mothers have died or otherwise, then I think we'll succeed. This program will succeed. We can grow, seriously grow by doing this. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, and I think that's the thing that I see, is that the referrals that come through by making sure that family members have access to the healthcare that they need for either themselves or the children, and then making sure that they're empowered so they can stand on their own 2 feet and they're not at risk because of financial or hunger, then they're in a really good position to raise then the next generation, which I definitely see that in the work that Open Arms does. So probably the next question is probably more for Jane, really, about the biggest challenges that women face in terms of kind of access to healthcare, also education and employment as well. But yeah, what are the challenges that women face in terms of access to healthcare?
So in Malawi, actually, access to healthcare is better for women than men. I think because women will get pregnant at some point, and then they will have babies, and the clinics that cover pregnancy and children are quite great. So so the under 5 clinics are great. The educational levels are that the educational material that they're given there is quite good. So the only issue that we've seen as clinicians in Malawi is that sometimes the health centers will not have the medicines, the drugs that they need when they're sick. And therefore that is probably the barrier that I would see. And then for us as Open Arms, probably what would need to work on is to have the financial resources to help them when they're sick. Once they have their diagnosis, then to make sure that they're able to buy the medications that they need. So I think that's the biggest thing at the moment, and it's been like that for years on end in Malawi. You can have, even at central level hospitals, that is, then you may not have a drug like amoxicillin. So yet they're not particularly that expensive. So if we factor in the fact that if we can provide that capacity to say, when they're sick, when the babies are sick, if they take them to the hospital, if there is a diagnosis, there is a drug to be bought, then we should have the capacity to help with buying those drugs. Yeah, thank you.
Okay, thanks. And Christy, what about the challenges that you've seen in your work, education, healthcare, or employment for women? Oh, Christy might have frozen.
Yeah.
I think she's frozen.
Okay.
We're doing well so far, though. We're doing good.
Okay.
What about, Jane, if we move on to the next question, what about communities that don't support gender equality or kind of women's empowerment? Have you seen any examples of that through the work of Open Arms, and kind of how would you tackle that?
So at the moment, and in the last few years, Open Arms has been running feeding centers, which alleviates hunger for children, particularly those that are vulnerable, that are under the age of 5. So that helps a lot, in the sense that it assures that that child can have at least 1 meal per day. But moving forward, I think is the main stumbling block, apart from the behavior of the weather and the rains each year, the main stumbling block is access to fertilizer, essentially.
Okay.
Even if the rains were good that year, if someone doesn't have fertilizer, the maize doesn't do very well. So I think we need to make sure to empower the women that are going to look after our children. Apart from giving them seed, we must make sure that we give them fertilizer, not necessarily in monetary terms, but actually to physically buy that fertilizer and then give it to them. because what you don't want is for money to be used for other reasons once it arrives in the home, because there may be other people that can influence that woman, maybe take that money away, let's say the males of the household. So for us, I think we need to seriously consider a program where we actually supplying fertilizer to those women that are looking after their children. And then the other thing is also to try to get them to diversify what they grow. So normally people tend to go towards constantly going to think about maize only. It's not only about maize. We should also maybe supply seed for soya, and also maybe beans, pigeon peas, So those are the kind of maybe packages that we should really seriously look into in order to empower that woman. Because once people have those things in place, then we can assure that the next season would be better for those women and in the children that they're looking after. At the community level, that helps, because we will have people so they will not only be looking after the babies that we're giving them, but they also have their own families. So the whole families will benefit. And there are two types of fertilizer that we use: the one that makes the maize grow, and also the one that makes the maize produce the cob. So these are crucial fertilizers. If we assure one bag of each per family, and then make sure that we supply seed for maize, beans, soya, and pigeon peas, then that will be the way to go to empower our communities.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And I think that's the foundations of the agriculture program, or the graduation program, isn't it? That we're trying in at the moment. And I think also the important point there is the monitoring and the partnership with these women and their families, because I think it's one thing to give cash, but it's making sure that cash is used for the right supplies, or giving supplies, but then making sure that those supplies are actually used for the benefit of the people they're intended for. And that, in my mind, that's the strength of Open Arms, that we work in partnership. It's not just a handout, it's continuous work with a family to make sure that the outcomes delivered as well. Yeah, that's great.
The other thing that I could also say is that probably the outreach workers that we would have on our books is to actually visit those families during the growing season, just to make sure that we've achieved what we've set out to achieve, that the maize is looking green, and they've got everything going well. Just to, because it's still, the issue is still about the influence of maybe male members in the family on this woman. It's just to make sure the fertilizer was indeed used the way it was intended to be used. Yeah, so I think that this self-sufficiency, it will need a lot of input from us.
And I think that's really important to explain to donors and supporters as well, because a lot of people will support the bag of fertilizer, but may not necessarily understand the importance of that partnership and those continuous monitoring visits, which is just, they work hand in hand, don't they?
They do. They should indeed. Yeah.
Christy, are you back? Can you hear us?
Yes, I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Excellent. Yes, we can do.
It's raining, and I think I've been losing network.
Yeah.
Okay.
You're probably better off just doing audio.
Yeah.
I think I need to go back and answer some of the questions that I missed.
Yeah.
If that's okay.
Yeah, the two things that we were just discussing was about the challenges that women face in Malawi with access to things like education, healthcare, and employment. And then the second point was about how Open Arms, or how to work with communities that maybe don't support gender equality and women's empowerment. So if you've got comments on those 2 points, that would be really interesting to hear.
Okay. Thank you. So the first part, I think the challenges from a young woman's perspective, especially in healthy care, for me, I'll speak about mostly access, because as a woman of a reproductive age, as a woman that lives in a rural area, access to reproductive health and rights is actually discriminated. If you're a young woman and you're going for the hospital, you're seeking condoms or family planning, you can face a lot of discrimination and stigma, because we live in a religious, we call ourselves a religious nation. And as a young person, you're supposed to be married first before you access some of these things. So, I mean, medical personnel sometimes judge you, and it's really difficult. That's why young people usually prefer youth-led organization to access this reproductive healthy services than actually going to a mainstream hospital. And I can also speak about, in terms of access, how some of the medical services are not available. Some of medication is not available for young people. So you have also that challenge where you go to the hospital and whatever you're looking for, services you're looking for, they are not available at the time. I think that's one of the biggest challenge. I can also speak about, how I feel like as women, sometimes we do not have our body autonomy in Malawi. There are things that are prescribed to us. We talk of issues of abortion, just procuring abortion is criminalized in Malawi. And I think this takes away your body autonomy, your body rights as a woman in Malawi. I think that's some of the issues that we should be looking at in terms of access to health. And we know the complications that has on a woman's body. We see teenage pregnancies, and we see a lot of things that are happening with young girls, young children. So I think that's in terms of education. I would talk about the infrastructure itself. I feel like sometimes the infrastructure itself is not designed with a young girl in mind. I say this because we look at the distances that young girls have to walk from their homes to the school. This actually, the distance actually can make young women, in between the traveling from home to school, a lot of things can happen. We have seen young girls being raped because you also have to pass through the men's fields, especially now during the rain season. You have to pass through rivers. You have to pass through a lot of things. And apart from that, also our gender roles in Malawi. As a young girl, I'm expected to wake up, clean, wash plates, clean the house before I go to school. And that's really something that it takes out, because you have to wake up early in the morning, 4 a.m. You're losing sleep. You wake, you have to travel a long distance, and you have to be in class and compete with the boys that do not have to do the chores that you did. So there are a lot of challenges when you look at education, access to health for young women and girls. And I've seen from the few weeks that I've worked with Open Arms, I think Open Arms is trying to bridge some of these gaps, because what I've seen is Open Arms trying to look for schools, like put these girls in boarding schools, and that reduces the risk of things that I've mentioned, sexual abuse on the way to school. And also, you can't do chores. You can only do your chores in boarding school. So that actually makes the girl focus on education rather than just the chores. But, for a normal Malawi who is not in an open arms system, those challenges still exist. And I think that's what Open Arms also should advocate for, should try to bridge the gap for young girls to access education. Because when you see at the dropout rates, you see that many children, like Jen mentioned, enrollment is very good right now. From standard 1, you see there are equal numbers of girls and boys. But once you advance to standard 7 and 8, that's when the menstrual hygiene challenges come in access to, sanitary products that are not available in schools. And this make young girls to drop out because why do I have to go to school when I can take care of myself? It's really hard. Yeah, so even female teachers sometimes have to skip school because there are not enough there are no facilities for them to take care of themselves when they are during their menstruation periods. So I think that's some of the challenges that I'll speak about. In terms of communities that please, may you repeat the second question?
Yeah, it was about communities that don't necessarily support gender equality or women's empowerment, and
Okay.
how you kind of work with those communities in terms of Open Arms and more broadly as well.
Okay. So when you look at our Malawian context, I mean, I already say that it's a very patriarchal system, and that manifests itself in a way that our traditions, our norms, are the things that we believe in. So I think most of the societies, if you ask me, are patriarchal, and that means they really do not accept gender equality. In most societies, when you go, they will tell you, the gender equality, you can go and do it in your office. Here, a woman is supposed to cook. A woman is supposed to take care of children. A woman is supposed to do this and that, and a girl is supposed to do this and that. So I think basically it's all about awareness of what a woman is supposed to do. We're not saying a woman is not supposed to work in the household, but reducing that time poverty, because the amount of time spent on these chores does not give this woman opportunities to go and seek for employment or to do productive work that will provide income. So that sort of awareness, just sensitizing the community about, a woman and a man, they are both equal in terms of who is supposed to provide for the family, who is supposed to do household chores, who is supposed to take care of children. And with the care work that Open Arms do, I think I sort of talked about dismantling the perception that care work is something that is not supposed to be paid. I think with Open Arms, you bring in a lot of women and you pay them for the care work, and that sort of dismantles that perception that, care work is supposed to be free. I think for sensitization around all those issues, it takes time. That's why I think our Open Arms funders have to really invest in this, because, patriarchal system has been there for ages, for centuries. And the work that we're doing is in its infant stages, and we need a lot of investment in terms of funds, in terms of human capital going into working, making people to understand that, a woman should be afforded the same rights as a man. A girl child should be afforded the same opportunities as a boy child. So yeah, that's what I'll speak for now.
That's really good, thank you. And so I suppose finally, the theme for this year's International Women's Day is about accelerating action. And I think I can't remember the stat off the top of my head, but there is a stat circulating about how many years it will be until we achieve that gender equality, and it's way over 100. So I think there's definitely a recognition that the pace of change is too slow and almost feels like it's going backwards in some areas as well. I just wanted to ask before we close, is there anything else that you'd like to share, or is there anything personally that you'd really like to see in this area? Jane, do you want to go first? Oh, you're on mute. Jane, we can't hear you.
I'm muted because I have a colleague in the office. So thank you, Claire. I think we should continue advocating for equality in the workplace, which, as I said, even in Malawi, things are already happening where gender parity is being encouraged in the workplace. at educational level, even in universities, when selections are being made, there is deliberate moves to have gender parity for selections into universities. That should also continue to be encouraged. We have already movements to stop child marriages in Malawi, and particularly villages where the village chiefs, if it's a female, then it works very well because they're able to relate to this. In terms of at a very local level, if we're talking of within the villages, I think to deliberately put in systems where a woman is given the resources that she needs, particularly to grow food herself, and also to have livestock. Probably at that level, at village level, to ensure that that woman has the decision making herself, and also to actually have ownership. I think we should encourage those programs that give that woman the resources that she needs, without her waiting for the male members of her family to make those decisions. So every year to have programs that actually target women, giving them the resources that they need to grow food for the next season, and also maybe something that she could sell, like livestock and so on and so forth. I suppose we could also think of small businesses to, we have companies that bring in second-hand clothes, and we could maybe make programs that would give women within the villages those second-hand clothes to sell, so that they have that financial independence. I think we are getting there. I've lived long enough to see the changes. I relate to what Christy was saying, that waking up at 4 a.m., having to prepare the family for that day, and then at the same time go to school. But I think we are getting there, whereby the girls are being encouraged to remain in school, and I think we just need to do more. But at the level of a village, we should have programs that empower the woman to have resources to grow her food, and to have livestock and various other things like that. Yeah. All right. Thank you.
Thank you. And Christy, have you got any last words to say?
Yes, thank you, Claire. I would say that, this work that we do, like the work that Open Arms do, the work that Jen do, and the work that I do, it's political. It's very political work. And by doing the work, we are fighting systems. We are fighting wars that have existed for a long time. And we know that in Malawi, with the policies that we have, having policies does not guarantee that lives of women and girls will be affirmed. There have to be some sort of accountability from policyholders, from duty bearers, and it's our job as feminist leaders or women rights activists, advocates, to actually go and keep holding the space for other women that maybe do not have the same platforms as we do, and just hold policymakers accountable. Make sure resources are allocated to end gender-based violence, to afford women opportunities. And this work, it's really, really important if we are really going to accelerate gender equality in Malawi. We have seen countries, model countries like South Africa, that have policies, but we still see women who are still experiencing different types of marginalization, and that also happens in Malawi. So our work is just starting. we need to be part of a movement, because what we are fighting has been a movement for years and centuries. And we, as women rights activists, advocates, we also need to hold each other's hands and prevent rollback. We have seen things like, Cyclone Freddy in Malawi, you know, taking us back to where we started. So a simple pandemic can erase the efforts that we have done. So our work is to make sure that that work that we have done is not erased, and we are continuing to provide opportunities for women, for girls in education, in health, in employment, and we are speaking. And we are also giving these women a platform. I think one of the things that I like to talk about is, what we call survivor-centered approach, where you actually give women, vulnerable women, a platform to say what they really want when it comes to their rights, not actually going and telling them that this is what you should do. So I think that's also what we can do, hold the space for women and girls, vulnerable women and marginalized women, to actually voice their needs, their concerns, and make sure these people are safeguarded, they are protected. And yeah, that's most of our work, to be able to assimilate gender equality in Malawi. Thank you.
That's so good. Thank you so much. We'll leave it there for today. It's been an absolute honour to share this virtual space with both of you, and hear your knowledge and your passion and your experiences. And I think the stories just show the strength and resilience and the role that women and girls play in Malawi, and how important it is to have that community-driven approach and that partnership approach of working alongside families and communities, which is exactly where Open Arms sits. So if this works, we want to share the recording with our supporters. So for anyone who is watching, I want to say a big thank you for watching. It's the generosity of supporters that fuel this work and is the backbone of everything that we do. So if anyone wants more information about the programmes that Open Arms runs, or how you can be involved, then you can visit our website, or you can contact us at any time. And I hope this leaves you feeling inspired to support. It certainly does with me, and I hope that we can build more of these conversations in the future, and that this recording works well, so we can do more of these, because it's been so insightful and so wonderful to hear from both of you. So on behalf of us all, I'd just end with saying a big thank you.